Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4, The Scarcity Mindset. So, today we're going to talk about scarcity as a mindset. We had touched on it, I think, way back in the beginning of Season 1 a little bit, but I think what's sort of inspiring me is I've been hearing so much from my colleagues about a scarcity of time, which is ironic because most of us are working virtually, at least partially. And there are so many different ways to be scarce. And, people jump right away to money, which of course is also true. Scarcity of not having enough money and all that leads to. And there are so many other ways to experience scarcity that I think it's really worth exploring. And also, scarcity as a mindset. Because I think of mindset almost like a colander, like we dump pasta into or vegetables, and what stays stays and what goes down the drain kind of thing. So it's our own cognitive filter. And that's really important when we're talking about the feeling of scarcity, because it's a feeling, right? That comes from thinking about scarcity and then leads us into behaving in a way that tries to get us to kind of obsess and sometimes, hoard, not necessarily stuff, but time or whatever. And this is such an important topic right now, in general. And also, as we continue to, sprint this marathon of the pandemic, I think it's just a really important conversation to have. And there's a really good book that's out. It's called Scarcity. I remember that I think I was teaching, it was the Community College of Vermont, I want to say, that actually purchased this for all of us because, um, a lot of the demographics where I am in Vermont are, socioeconomically compromised. And this is pre-pandemic. This was, I don't know, several years ago. And they purchased this book for all of us, which was fabulous, so that we could try to get an idea of, obviously it wasn't all of our students, but certainly a good portion of them, and to kind of get a little bit more of an understanding of where they were coming from. And so the authors of Scarcity are Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. And again, we're going to stretch this, as they do, past the economics kind of scarcity. So, the authors kind of start us off with explaining, they say, the consequence of having less than we want is simple. We are unhappy. The poorer we are, the fewer nice things we can afford, be it a house in a good school district or as little as salt and sugar to flavor our food. The busier we are, the less leisure time we can enjoy, be it watching television or spending time with our families. The fewer calories we can afford, the fewer foods we can savor, and so on. Here's the point right here, Minecrafters, okay? Having less is unpleasant, and it can have repercussions. For example, on health, safety, or education. And here's like the theme right here. Scarcity leads to dissatisfaction and struggle. What also could have crept into my kind of inspiration zone here is I just wrote a blog for Psychology Today, which is loads of fun. It's short and it's just fun. I'm really kind of enjoying that. And this one was about being zoomed out. I've heard a lot lately, and people using the word bandwidth, and I have 5.5 hours on Zoom to look forward to today. And it's the irony here is many people who are fortunate, I should get a disclaimer, who are fortunate enough, to still have our jobs. Many people are working virtually, and at least partially. And I've heard so much lately. I'm zoomed out. I can't stare at a screen for one more second, like insinuating that they don't have any time to call their own, the need to take lots of breaks. And all of that makes sense. I have felt that myself, for sure. And I think that it's really worth talking about because people keep saying this phrase, a new normal, if there is such a thing. And we will learn to navigate it, for certain. We will learn to navigate it. And right now, however, I think we're still kind of in that, learning how to navigate it. And I think it helps. Well, I know that it helps with awareness, no matter what we're talking about, to first have an awareness of what it is that's going on, to really sit with ourselves and, what are my thoughts about this? Am I feeling trapped? And then, often there's like the guilt, because I hear I work with amazing people. They're just wonderful. And you can kind of hear the guilt sometimes. And I've caught myself, Am I whining about having 5 or 6 hours of Zoom? I'm being trapped in a screen, and even using the word trapped, and people without jobs, and I'm able to be home, and so there's the secondary emotion of guilt that kind of trails along with that as well. So my thoughts are with exploring this scarcity mindset to kind of explore it mindfully, of course, which means to look at it as much as we can objectively and not judge ourselves. If we're feeling trapped, we're feeling trapped. We don't need to explain that to anybody. Those are what our feelings are, and that's okay, right? That's okay. We feel how we feel. And I think it's good to just kind of get a handle on that as far as why we're feeling this way, which means we take a further big leap backwards because the thoughts had to be there before we can feel it. And why are we thinking this way? Why are we thinking that we're feeling trapped or, we're not getting what we need. We're not getting enough of what we truly need. Really important to look at that because not only does it affect our own well being, when our well being is affected, and especially if other people are dependent on us, parents out there, or also taking care of aging parents, partners, whatever, when we have other people dependent on us, us having a shorter bandwidth, feeling scarcity, feeling burnt out at the extreme is going to affect each and every person in our lives, even the dog. Because here's the thing, scarcity obviously is, like a physicality. It's about, not having enough, materially and basic needs wise, food, electricity, everything like that. And it's also a mindset. Remember the colander thing? It really is a mindset that kind of captures us, captures our attention. And Sendhill and Eldar say that, when scarcity captures our attention, it changes how we think, whether it is at the level of milliseconds, hours, or days and weeks. By staying top of mind, it affects what we notice, how we weigh our choices, how we deliberate, and ultimately what we decide and how we behave. So, when the last time we kind of touched on this was way back when the world had just barely closed. And I think we were talking about this related to, the missing toilet paper and how that was, kind of triggering people. That word can be overused sometimes, but in this case, it was fitting, kind of flipping the switch on people. And I think we talked about how, the toilet paper, the empty rows in the grocery store with toilet paper and paper towels and popcorn actually was really flipping the switch on people who had experienced scarcity in their lives in lots of different ways. And that was the point um, in that last episode, in the beginning of season 1. And now I kind of want to expand past that, and that, at least for the time being, is sort of subsided, and expand really to where we are as we emerge into reentry and into so many of us working virtually. And obviously, when something affects overall how we think, which is what a mindset does, right? It's thereby affecting our judgment, our reasoning, and our ability to make decisions and problem solve. And this is very, very important because this is our everyday. So here's the thing, scarcity, in general, whether someone's impoverished, they're too busy, they're lonely. We think of shortage of time, shortage of friends, shortage of material things and the basic needs. We said all of that. And the deal is that scarcity, regardless of what it is we don't have enough of, leads to a shortage of bandwidth. And I have to say, especially, where I teach, I've had so many of my wonderful colleagues. I mean, I hear this word, literally, I don't use the word every, polarized words. It's said the high majority of time, let's say, because I want to say every day. The high majority of days, I'm hearing at least, one, two, three, four, five people use the word bandwidth in a regular sentence. And I find myself using it as well. And obviously, this relates to, in technology, ironically, in a way, too. It's the amount of, kind of space and, that we have for cognitive agility and room to breathe and move and make choices. So really what's of interest this time around, right, as we're moving forward into this, uh, again, quote unquote, new normal, I don't like that phrase, is really how scarcity generates certain behaviors and how scarcity perpetuates and often amplifies itself through what we do when in a scarcity mindset. So the authors of Scarcity give us a couple of examples here. And they say, imagine two students, Felix and Oscar. Felix spends a good amount of time on work due at the end of each week and turns in his assignments on time. He is busy but relaxed. Oscar, on the other hand, who is equally talented in taking the same classes, is crunched for time. He's working more hours, feels harried, and rushes to turn in his assignments late every week. Late every week. What, what makes Oscar so much busier? He's not taking more classes. He is not a less productive person. Instead, Oscar is simply one step behind. This is the key right here. He's working on last week's assignments. Unlike Felix, for whom the material is vivid because he just heard the lecture, Oscar takes extra time reminding himself what the class did last week and trying to keep it apart from, yet not forget, this morning's lecture. Oscar works harder, but gets no more work done. Oscar is one step behind. It was also interesting that, I just kind of decided actually this morning to do this topic, and maybe I had some other, subconscious drive, because this is week 3 right now in school, at least where I teach. And this is the week, and I have mostly first years, right? So they're just getting to Hogwarts kind of thing. And, big eyes and new backpacks, new clothes, and, excited. This year obviously is a little different, but thankfully there's still some of that excitement there. And they get there the first couple of weeks, and it's like, woohoo, this is college, and it's meeting people and, going out and doing things, again, limited this time, but still some of it's happening in moderation. And the newness is fun and exciting, and it's oh, yay, yay, yay about college. Isn't this great? Giovanni's about to bark. My apologies. Giovanni is our very adorable golden retriever who's sitting here giving me emotional support. And rather than shut it down, I like to bring in the real. Hopefully you can envision this right now. So back to the student example. The first and second week, it's like, oh, this is fun. But it's also the first couple of weeks are, easy, to be quite frank. We're kind of letting students get used to college and the whole experience, doing their laundry, finding the cafeteria, never mind all the new adjustments. And then by the time week 3 hits, it's like, whoa, and sometimes week 4. And so I try to give them the heads up that, the first 2 weeks have been great and college is still going to remain fun and exciting with all kinds of new opportunities. And I also kind of gently remind them repeatedly, actually at least a few times, to pay attention to their syllabi, because I've been there, I think this is my 11th year, and each and every year, no matter how much I remind them, they end up getting a couple steps behind in the 3rd and 4th week because they just don't process. We got to stay on top of this. And they usually, if they're full-time students, it's 5 classes. And all of a sudden, the easy breezy couple of weeks comes to a screeching halt. And all of a sudden they've got all these, papers and projects that they just weren't quite ready for. And it fits beautifully with the example we just spoke about here. And the authors, Sendhill and Eldar, give another example, and they say, so you can be one step behind. You can also be one step behind with money. I certainly know that one for sure at 55 years old. Imagine now that Felix and Oscar are farmers, planting the same crop season after season. Felix uses his own savings to buy seed, fertilizer, and to cover living expenses until harvest time. Oscar borrows money for the same purposes. Just as Felix the student looked more relaxed, Felix the farmer now looks richer. Oscar has less to spend. Although both Felix and Oscar earn the same income, some of Oscar's goes to paying off the interest on his loan. Again, the problem is that Oscar is one step behind. Felix's income goes for investing for the next season. Oscar's income pays off last season's loan. And, here's a disclaimer, because if any of you have seen my TED Talks too, I'm certainly not judging this one. And there are also, with the money thing, it's hard. And also there are certainly legitimate reasons we get behind, because life can throw us curveballs and such like that. However, much of the time, with scarcity in general, like with the student example, the money example, and we're about to get into the scarcity of time with this new virtual world many of us are living in. Legit things come up for sure. We're not saying that doesn't happen. And also, if we're really honest with each other, a lot of this is of our own doing. This is the thing. So the authors talk about this contrast between Felix and Oscar, or maybe metaphorically stick yourself in there, because I can certainly do that. At 55, I've definitely had phases of getting a step behind. I honestly and humbly admit that to all of you. So I say this contrast between Felix and Oscar clarifies what we mean by a scarcity trap. Both face clear constraints, but Oscar is trapped into scarcity through his own behaviors. More generally, the scarcity trap is more than a shortage of physical resources. It is based on a misuse of those assets so that there is an effective shortage. It is constantly being one step behind, constantly paying off last month's expenses. Again, metaphorically, fill in the blank with whatever that means for you. It is a way of managing and using what you have so that it looks and feels like you have even less. An initial scarcity is compounded by the behaviors that magnify it. Just so true. And in the earlier parts of my life when I couldn't seem to get this lesson once, so then of course the universe brings it back to you until you master it, or at least get a little better. Then you kind of go on for a while doing well, at least for me. This is what was true for me way back when with money. And the universe kind of keeps throwing this lesson at you until you get it, right? Eventually it kind of gets better, but then you kick it, at least for me, I just would kick myself like, really? I kind of caved into that again. And eventually it gets better. And this is, kind of what the authors say. They say that these two scenarios we just talked about illustrate how scarcity is not merely about physical resources. I think a lot of people think that, quite honestly. And they say in both cases, Felix and Oscar have the same resources available. Yet Oscar experiences scarcity, whereas Felix does not. In the first case, Felix and Oscar have the same amount of work and time. In the second, they have the same amount of land and income. Their different outcomes come from how those resources are deployed. And this is, sometimes we have that conversation with ourselves when we're listening to something or reading something or watching something, whatever. And we're like, duh, I know that. And the irony there is we can have those duh moments. And if we're honest with ourselves, we may know that on some level. It just may be on the back burner, and our behavior may not exactly be in sync with what we are quite sure we think we know. I just really get that, especially with the finances. And this authors use the word poor a lot, but I don't think it really has to be so extreme, right? Because things in life, as we've discussed previously through many of these episodes, things happen generally in life on a spectrum. So, there's the extreme end where basic needs aren't met and impoverished, and then there's the middle that maybe is comfortable on the other end where people are well off. But there's obviously a whole range between impoverished and comfortable where people are, basic needs might be met, but they're constantly just, 2, 3, 4 steps behind, and feeling like they're just, right now I'm coming to a visual of like being in a pool or body of water when you're completely underneath and all your mouth is at the top, kind of gasping for air. Or maybe your head's a little bit more out of water, but the fear is there that you might go under. Maybe your head's even more out of water, like up to your neck, but you're still looking around for some place to latch onto and grab on for security. There's a whole range, obviously, of spectrum of financial insecurity that still has varying degrees of fear and anxiety. And, sort of understand how we sometimes manage to get stuck is one thing, right? And then we sometimes not only get stuck, we end up sort of staying stuck. So it's really important to understand how that happens. And the authors talk about, how we juggle things. And we all picture, or maybe we don't all picture, I can't speak for all of you for sure. What comes to my mind, I'm actually thinking of, when I was in Disney World, like 12, and they had this whole family of acrobats and jugglers, and they're throwing all kinds of balls in the air and, like bowling pin looking things, lots and lots in the air. And they did it with such grace, rarely, if ever, dropping anything. And that's what comes to my mind. And it's how we juggle that kind of predicts the getting stuck thing. And so the authors say that juggling is why predictable events are treated like shocks. When you juggle, you tunnel. I think they're very focusing on here. When you tunnel the balls that are about to drop, and you neglect those high in the air, when those balls suddenly descend, they are news to the tunneled juggler, a shock, if you will. An observer might see the ball coming down for quite some time. As disinterested parties, we can see school fees looming. To people, let's say impoverished, juggling their finances, they only become real when they are imminent. So the authors of scarcity then say, this way of managing scarcity leads to a messy balance sheet. As we reach repeatedly for the most proximate solution to the most immediate problem, over time, these short-term fixes create a complex web of commitments. The result is a messy patchwork of assets and obligations. So for the busy, which is what we're getting to now, right? Because I keep hearing this from my colleagues. For the busy, this means burdened and contorted schedules of the kind we are talking about when they first discuss this, actually, in the opening chapter, with near toppling piles of to-dos and double booked appointments. It's ironic, or just wow, I just yesterday, because I've been hearing this so much from the awesomes that I work with, and just yesterday, this colleague of mine she's great, she's fabulous, and we had those Google Meets scheduled, on the calendar, and it's a project we're working on that's actually very exciting. I'm pumped to do it, and it was the second one that we missed. Just she couldn't connect. She got behind, so she writes me this lovely, very apologetic letter, which on my end wasn't even necessary. I mean, I totally get it, bandwidth thing right now, like we said, but I could tell that she was explaining and trying to convince me that she's usually so punctual, believe, and I absolutely do believe her. She's great. I love her. And all of that secondary emotion, all that guilt, also, feeling like she's trying to, reach that or maintain that professional bar and standard, and which she absolutely is. It's just the circumstances right now, and being 2, 3, 4 steps behind, and being, that level of, just the mouth sticking out of the water, frantically trying just to get air in. I get it. I really get it, and I could really, really relate to how she was feeling in this email. And so I'm sure lots and lots of you can relate, whether you're college students, because we kind of use that example, whether you're young adults out in the workforce just getting started in a nutty, nutty time of history. I can't imagine you can't relate, because you're out there trying to prove yourselves, and you're trying to get a handle on things. And while we have this fear-based energy going on with the masks and all these rules, and it's a lot. And then, or you're seasoned adults, like we're talking about, my colleagues, and having so much anxiety over trying to meet this professional bar, and all these standards and expectations. And I'm sure probably many of you can relate. And I'm thinking of the Google Calendar. If many of you have a Google Calendar, or you've got something that's similar where you're keeping track of things on your phone, and with us, the Google Calendar is super convenient and easy, because people's emails just pop up and you just can make appointments. The flip side of that is people can go into your calendar and make meetings for you, which I'm guessing is why my wonderful colleague was completely overwhelmed. She was double booked. She said that because people can kind of go in and just make appointments for you, which can be super efficient and obviously super overwhelming. I mean, it's just so true. And the authors say this, it's just such a good comparison. They say missed deadlines are a lot like overdue bills. Double booked meetings, which means, of course, committing time you do not have, are a lot like bounced checks, which, is spending money you do not have. That's such a, oh my God, such a great analogy. The busier you are, the greater the need to say no. The more indebted you are, the greater the need to not buy. Plans to escape sound reasoning but prove hard to implement. They require constant vigilance about what to buy or not buy, right? Or to agree or not, what not to agree to, right? So when vigilance flags, the slightest temptation in time or in money can make you sink even deeper. And they say that the psychology of scarcity is primitive and changing it from within can be hard. And they say that you don't really need to change the psychology, though, to have the right outcome. It's really more about changing the environment to counteract the psychology. And the authors say that we don't even really need to change the environment drastically. So their examples are talking about a specific company. In the example, I'm not going to go through all that. And this personal assistant to this president kind of comes in and knocks 5 minutes before a meeting's over. Let's him or her, they, whoever. No, the next one is coming, because that is all so easy now. Even just with a cell phone, we can have there's a do not disturb button. There are infinite ways to set alarms. So really, we can have that assistant thing just with the technology and make it work for us. The same thing that's driving us a little crazy right now, we can make work for us. So it says meetings are still scheduled back to back, and this person was the president, still tunnels through these meetings. All the quote unquote assistant does, let's say cell phone alarm or whatever reminder, does it, all the assistant does is stand in the way of that. Your little 5-minute beep or whatever, preventing the psychology of scarcity from doing harm. You can think of it as akin to a rumble strip on the side of the highway. It's a small change, yet it protects drivers against their wandering minds and fatigue. It's much easier than getting them to focus or to sleep more. This setting alarm thing, do not disturb button, is just one tip, and it's a really good idea. And another tip that would work also for you students listening who are overwhelmed with your learning management systems and all of that is to, let's say the Google Calendar or whatever else you use. There are other ways to do this, is to block out times for yourself. Block out busy times and just put something in the title. We want to be honest. We're not going to make stuff up. We can write busy or a meeting. You can have a meeting with your dog or God, just meeting, and block out some time, whether that's wellness time, which is fantastic, and or you're actually working, you're planning, or you're, let's say, doing a podcast, for example, okay? And block that out so that somebody isn't thinking you're free because you're not, okay? And kind of sticking, a meeting in there. As that's another tip. I have a very good friend of, well, ours, who gave me a tip. Oh my gosh, had to be 12 years ago. And there's a book about it, which I wish I could rattle off the title of because I don't have it in front of me. It was something like the 4-Minute Work Week or something like that. But the point is that his tip, because he's been implementing this for like 12 years, he works for, I forget, Google or Firefox now or one of those. And he said that this tip is so good. I actually just put it in the blog for Psychology Today, is to set twice a day with a conservative amount of time. Maybe give yourself 10 minutes, 50, it depends on what your busy level is, right? Twice a day that's on a schedule, like 8 in the morning and let's say 2 in the afternoon to check emails. This is a tough one because it's like, we're just so tempted. It's like trying to hold in a sneeze to check emails, right? Wow, does that free up time? And if you have to start a little slower, not judging, with 3 times per day of 10 minutes. But the thing is to stick to it because it's so easy, especially working virtually, you're on the computer anyway. Well, when somebody's having, talking endlessly, one of those super boring, informative meetings that, where you can tell by people's eyes when you're on Zoom, you can tell they're emailing or texting or something, right? We're so tempted to dip in and check our email. Try very hard to stick to it. Again, start slow, do 3, then down to 2, and figure out what that workable window is for you, because you don't want to also create more anxiety with not having enough time. Make it, play with it. Maybe you need 20 minutes twice a day, but the point is stick to it so that the time in between, you've created some cognitive freedom for yourself, as well as being way more efficient with your time. Learning to say no, which has also become easier. That's hard for a lot of people. We often come into that with age. No can be just a fantastic word to embrace. It's healthy, as long as we do it with respect, and honesty and respect, right? And that's gotten so much easier with technology. We can simply decline an invitation. Don't even have to say something to anybody. Don't have to look at anybody. We can just decline an invitation for something. We're not talking about obviously declining things that are, essential for our jobs. And no way am I trying to allude to being irresponsible. It's just that with this age of technology and many of us working virtually, we've got to just say no to some of these virtual coffee breaks and virtual poetry readings or whatever. And if the poetry is what you're looking forward to all day or all week, then go for it. And then kind of filter through and decide what's important and what isn't, because hacking away at the inessentials every day is just so important. And really in 2020 for sure. I mean, just in even outside of the pandemic, the world's just gotten so fast and overstimulating, right? Saturated with media. People can literally catch us 24/7 if we have a cell phone. It's gotten very overwhelming, and we kind of really have to step up and seize some intentionality around our own well-being. We just have to do that. And because the thing is, the world's not going to get slower, right? The world's not going to get slower. We know that. It's not like, next year we're going to have fewer emails happening or fewer text messages or, cell phones are going to, fall off the face of the earth. None of that's happening. So in order to adapt, really comes down to, it's very Darwinian, adapt or die, right? Even if that's metaphorical for the die thing being metaphorical for just being completely miserable and burnt out, not much fun to be around, not enjoying, your life. It's going to take in this crazy time right now, especially, it's going to take courage and commitment to put some roadblocks up, some really healthy roadblocks up. That email thing works like a charm, okay? Those are some really, really good tips for right now. Okay, so remember, hack away at the inessentials. This is just a good practice. And I mean what's totally inessential. You just don't need to do it. As far as the very well-intentioned virtual coffee breaks, virtual happy hours, even we've had a couple of those and they were fun. People have good intentions, but you might also get, might also get, 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them, depending. So even though they're all well-intentioned, they might all be fun. Choose one, just one. Depending on your schedule, maybe 2 at the most. Because what'll happen is you'll look forward to it for 1, and you'll enjoy them for 2. And for college students, not different with all the clubs going on. I remember that being one of the toughest challenges for me because I was interested in all of it. I just wanted to do everything. And same thing, you'll actually enjoy yourself if you choose only 1 or maybe 2 and look forward to it and do it well. If it involves, any kind of skill set, because when we spread ourselves thin, we get burnt out, cranky. We're not that much fun to be around, and whatever it is, we just don't do it well. And then we end up going home with the flu. I mean, none of it's good. Or in this case, the Rona. Don't want to get burnt out. And the other thing, of course, is mindfulness. When we're busy, zipping around, chasing down people's approval, which is what it's really about, right? Making sure we check every box. We're at all 9 virtual coffee breaks. I mean, do you really want it to say on your tombstone, she never missed a meeting? Or she never missed, a virtual coffee break? Because here's the thing, maybe try calling in well, feeling too good. I'm not encouraging irresponsibility. I'm encouraging good choice making, right? And well-being. Because this is it. When we're walking around, being ripped out of being mindful, that means our very valuable life minutes are being burned up and thrown away. When what we should be doing is spending these like cash, spend our life minutes like they're cash. Okay, and then there's a gratitude piece. And again, I don't, ask my Minecrafters to do things I don't do myself. The gratitude piece, there's a journal, and it's super important to write it down. And also just if we're in that moment with, let's say, the context of what we're talking about, being zoomed out, too many virtual meetings, right? We can acknowledge that because we don't want to invalidate or minimize. Invalidate, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I've gone through, as it seems, one's with my boss, one's with my Somebody else who I can't miss, ones with, and really, there's not a lot of, you can't really trim the fat much today. Okay, then make a mental note of that. Carve out maybe at least 15 minutes for you to take a break in between or afterwards, something, and make a commitment to yourself to trim the fat as much as you can, tomorrow. I don't like to put anything off till tomorrow. I don't live that way. But it's fine. Carve out a piece of today, because today, this is the one today we have. This is it, not coming back. Carve something out that you really want to do that makes your heart sing. And then the other thing is, once we validate our feelings and carve some time out, to sort of steer ourselves to a place of gratitude. Because no matter how overwhelmed we are, or anything like that with the virtual meetings or whatever's going on at your workplace, it's just so important to come to a place of gratitude where we say, you know what, even though I'm overwhelmed, thank you. I'm so grateful that I have a job right now. I'm so grateful that I have a job right now, because there are many, many, many people who trade places with you in a New York second. Absolutely, especially right now. So the fact that we're still getting paychecks, those are still getting paychecks, big, big, big thank yous about that. And here's also the thing we talked about with gratitude before, and we'll bring it back to our scarcity mindset topic today. Here's the thing, we know this to be true. Scarcity, that chaotic catch-up energy, that just chaotic, panic button, catch-up, frantic energy, attracts more scarcity, more chaos, more catch-up mode, more, just manic-y, just frantic energy. We know that to be true. So when we slow it down, we're gonna kind of derail that. And with the gratitude piece, we also know that gratitude attracts more good things into our lives. So ideally, what we're really trying to acquire here and achieve, right, is balance. Or as I say to my Minecrafters, my students, we're trying to acquire or achieve, develop alignment, meaning that our insides match our outsides, and that we really look forward to our day ahead when we wake up. Like, wow, I'm excited for this day. I am excited for this day. I'm excited to live my life. I'm grateful for my life. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you to all of you for listening. I think I mentioned last week we've got a little over half of my listeners are from the States. It's like 59% something. The rest of everybody all over the world. It's fantastic to have such a mix. I think it's 41 or 42 countries represented at this point. So I'm going to give my best at this, okay? I'm going to thank the country of Qatar today. Thank you to my Minecrafters, my listeners in Qatar. Shukran, okay? Shukran. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right, because it's meant to be thank you. So again, thank you so much, all of you, for listening. And on that note, this is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.